see. There we are. Okay. Now I got my problem straightened out. Awesome. So here we are back at the Marshals Museum. Yeah, I just got the audio fixed. Thank you. And again, big thanks to Casey over in the other room for she just wanted to check on me and make sure everything was good. So back to this. One of the things in the museum field a lot of people have questions about is you'll see me quite often handling things with cotton gloves or nitrile gloves. Most of my stock of nitrile gloves, though, I ran out, and I have not attempted to purchase any, given everything going on with COVID-19, because if I've got a pack of gloves, that's somebody else who may need the pack of gloves. I can deal with my cotton gloves and rewash them and do whatever I need to do. So there's that going on. Other things that we look at, though, in handling objects within a museum setting, one of the things that we try to do in the case of paper objects, while handling using gloves is a nice barrier, because really that's what it is. It's a barrier between you and the object you're working with. Because I don't care how much you do stuff, you're going to have materials on your hands that will end up damaging objects over time. And one of the reasons why we like to use cotton is clean cotton gloves will make a barrier between your skin and the object, but it also is going to give you an opportunity to have a little bit of a cushion so you don't damage anything. I've known some people in the museum field who think that they are, and it looks like there's some issues with the feed right now. I'm not sure what's going on with that. Oh. There we go. I don't know. That's kind of weird. The internet seems like it's just having some issues today. Let me try. There we go. All right, there we go. Sorry, I had a little bit of a network issue going on. I'm not quite sure what's causing it. So anyway, here we are. We've got, so I started talking about wearing gloves and things like that in a museum setting. With a lot of materials, you have to watch out for what's on here. And so trying to help that with other objects, make sure there's no permanent damage done. And because really what we're trying to do is make sure that the materials last not just 5 years or 10 years, but 50 years or 100 years. And so when we're dealing with paper materials, there's a couple of steps that we'll do. And I'm going to, because I know I left you with a teaser on the post I made about this. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you a few special things in our collection that I'm going to start off based off of what I posted yesterday. And I'm going to switch to a different camera view. And what I'm dealing with here, how about that for tricky? These are the oaths of office for the 3 guardsmen. That's Bill Tillman, Guthrie, Oklahoma, 4th day of, looks like July 1894. Heck Thomas, 17th day of June 1889. That's for the Western District of Arkansas. The other one was signed Western District of Arkansas, but it was in Guthrie, Oklahoma. And then the third one, Chris Madsen. Chris Madsen came in, and I know that not all of these are going to be as zoomed in as we would like to do, but I need to have a solid camera shot for a lot of different things. And so this is Chris Madsen. This is looks like first day of June 1895, and that was Western District of Arkansas. And but that was also over in signed for over in Guthrie. So You've got a little bit of that going on. So I wanted to make sure I showed you guys some of those. I'm not going to go too much into the 3 guardsmen, just because I know that we've talked about that story a lot. One of the things, and one of the reasons why we try to do, one of the reasons why we try to handle paper materials without gloves is because the cotton in the gloves, if there is on an old piece of paper a rough edge, the gloves can catch that rough edge and tear it or make more damage. And so one of the things we like to do is try to encapsulate, just basically sleeve the documents like what you saw in that case. And everything in our collection is in the process of going to that best standard. And some things are done farther than others, and we're moving towards that. But here's another more recent thing, 1985. If you are familiar with the Redskin sting that the Marshals Service did in 1985, amazing story. There's an ESPN 30 for 30 short called Strike Team, I think it is. This is a Flagship International Sports Television. It was a fake company that the Marshals Service made specifically for this event. And it was so real to the point that the day that all of this stuff went down, on December 15th, a lawyer for one of the major networks showed up with a cease and desist order telling them that they couldn't do this because they weren't legally allowed to do any of this stuff. So one of the people there pulled them aside and explained what was up. The story is that there were a number of wanted fugitives in the greater District of Columbia area. And so the marshals then went and they sent out notes to the address of record for a lot of these folks. And when it happened, they were told that they were going to get free tickets to the football game. And so they showed up to do this breakfast. They showed up to do to catch all this stuff. They're greeted by women in tuxedos, like supposed to be cheerleaders. They're welcomed by team mascots, the San Diego Chicken. If you're old enough to remember the San Diego Chicken, San Diego Chicken is there. There's people in tuxedos welcoming them, thanking them. There's people greeting them and calling them great guests and special people, and just amazing. Every last one of those people was a deputy U.S. Marshal. They ended up netting 150 wanted fugitives that day. They would show up, they would sit them down in a meeting room in groups of about 20 at a time, and on the particular code word, the Special Operations Group would come in and process those people out of the room and into a holding cell, and then they would send in the next group. And so it was an amazing thing. It ended up, most times fugitive operations will cost thousands of dollars per fugitive, and in this case it was almost like barely hundreds of dollars per fugitive to catch them. So it was partially a cost-cutting measure, partially just a really easy, safe way to get these fugitives where they wanted to get them. So this is one of those postcards that was sent out. Just a blank postcard would have had the address and the stamp, and then Flagship International Sports Television, which, by the way, FIST is also Fugitive Investigative Strike Team. So if you have ESPN, try and find ESPN 30 for 30 short Strike Team. That's always a great one. One of the great things I like in our collection, these postcards. I'm just going to flip through these. Nobody famous in here, but from the Escape from the United States Penitentiary, McNeil Island, Washington. And these are the different people, description of them, the arrest and the wire. It's like $50 reward, their criminal history. And so a lot of these different people that you'll see here, and these cards would get sent out. And here's an example. This particular one, fingerprint classifications, known aliases, had a description of them, relatives, and just kind of to help people figure out where they might be. Like this person's relatives are all in Oklahoma, Okmulgee, Oklahoma City, Ardmore, and so you figure he might go to Oklahoma, and so people would watch that. This guy was even arrested by the marshals here in Fort Smith in 1935. So that's pretty neat that that ties to us a little bit too. But these postcards would get sent out from the Federal Bureau of Investigation, Department of Justice. They would get sent out, and then if you knew where this person was, you had the full list of all of the different Federal Bureau of Investigation offices and the phone number. This is how old it is. Back in the days when you would have the phone numbers set up with words with a number. So just to give you an idea of some of the different people, and most of these are nobodies. These are just a neat way. So this is kind of like the previous version of sending out information with most wanteds. All of these would have been sent to different law enforcement offices around the country in order to help them find these people. Speaking of most wanted, all the major law enforcement agencies have 15 most wanted, or like a list of most wanted. FBI, ATF, Marshals Service has their list of 15 most wanted. They were one of the later groups to do this. This is the prototype sheet when they decided they wanted to do a most wanted. And so this is an example that they just roughed out of what they wanted the sheet to look like. And then information on each of the posters and just how they wanted it to appear. And with all the information, so they would just rough this all out to figure what they wanted to have. And then they took this to their graphics people, and they worked on it, and they got it set up. So this was an opportunity for them in order to help figure out just kind of like the best way to do this. For this is one of those neat things that they did. Like, so this is Alphonse Persico, who was wanted for a long time. One of the pieces we have in the collection here is actually a bust that they had an artist do of what Persico might look like. And so we've got, and I think I've got a wanted poster. I've got a wanted poster here in the collection as well of Persico. But one of the things we do have is we have a ton of wanted posters for different individuals. I've talked in the past about the Marshals Service and asset forfeiture. I really, just if nothing else, really quickly as an aside, I really love getting a chance to show people the paper stuff, because some of the, like the museum nerds and historians like myself, we geek out on a lot of the paper materials, almost more so than we do on some of the other stuff that's behind me. But when we're doing this, it's a real fun job for us, because this really helps us with the meat and potatoes of talking about these subjects. I can have an object, but unless I know what the subject matter is behind that object, this is where that helps out. So I've talked about asset forfeiture before. Asset forfeiture is a division within the Marshals Service that if you are convicted of any sort of a crime, the judge in that case, as part of your punishment, has the opportunity for a lot of crimes, depending on what the legal description and what U.S. code says regarding the punishment for said crime. They have the ability to force you to forfeit your possessions. Sometimes that goes to pay towards remuneration for victims. Sometimes that goes to pay for your court actions. It goes through talking a lot about a number of different things, but the monies end up coming out. My personal favorite example of that is the case of Bernie Madoff, a New York financier who was running a Ponzi scheme, was convicted of that. As soon as he was arrested, the federal government froze all of his assets. So his bank accounts, his stocks, bonds, all of that stuff was frozen. He couldn't do anything with it. When he was convicted, as part of that conviction, the judge basically said, take everything. And so all of the liquid assets, all of the stocks, bonds, anything like that, obviously that gets cashed out. That ends up going into a fund. What do you do with all the physical stuff? And so in Madoff's case, houses, apartments, cars, boats, jewelry, clothing, furniture, artwork, all of that stuff. What do you do with it? And so the Marshals Service actually contracts, well, regardless of the federal agency, if you're arrested by ATF or FBI, DEA, Customs, any of those agencies, if you're arrested and it's a federal case, all of those materials then get routed through the Marshals Service. Because why? It goes back to 1789. The Marshals Service is there to do essentially any legal operations that the Department of Justice says that they need to do. And in this particular case, the Marshals Service was told, like when in all like cases of asset forfeiture, the Marshals Services said, take this, get the best price you can for it, and then this money goes into fund whatever to pay for, to help the victims out, or to go pay for the court costs and that person's fines. And so those materials go through a number of different auction companies around the country. If you just Google U.S. Marshals auction, you're going to see sales all over the country. You'll see I've seen everything from speedboats to large freighters. I've seen beater Chevys and Fords, all the way up to a Bugatti Veyron was sold a couple of years ago. Just some amazing stuff. But it's not a new thing. This has been happening since the founding of our country. And in this case, these are two posters from a Marshall sale from the District of Maine. And this was a public auction. Let me go ahead and transition over to this. This is a public auction for the sloop Mrs. Jarley. And I haven't had a chance to go through and find out what the case was with the Mrs. Jarley. But related to that, this is 9th day of September, 1927. The next year, the 13th day of December, 1928, in the same district, the motorboat S. Leonardo, her engine, tackle, apparel, and furniture. And so the other one, her boats, engine, tackle, apparel, and furniture. And so I'm guessing in both of these cases, being 1920s, what I would imagine, and being in Maine, what my best guess is, without doing any actual research into the subject, my first look is I would start looking at Prohibition. I would start looking at these two boats being used to smuggle alcohol from Canada into Maine, and then from Maine it would end up going down to Boston, down to New York, or elsewhere throughout the region. So I would fully expect that's what you're going to find researching both of those. And so related to that, I'm going to jump one object here. Related to that is we have this, and I'm going to go ahead and take my camera off so you can see that fully. Let's see here. Let's see here. Oh, at least I'm going to greatly limit my size on my camera. There we go. So, closed for violation of the National Prohibition Act by order of United States District Court, and it has the district that it mentions. All persons are forbidden to enter premises without order from the United States Marshal. That's one of the things a lot of people forget. They always think about the revenue agents, the prohibition agents, the predecessor of ATF. Remember, that's what the ATF stands for, is alcohol. Which, yes, BATFE, Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, Firearms, and Explosives. But for the purposes here, again, this goes to asset forfeiture, and it goes to a similar case of what the boats were. Anytime somebody was found to be using something to either an illegal brewery, an illegal was it an illegal bar of some sort, wine club, or anything else, if you were doing something against the National Prohibition Act, essentially manufacturing alcohol for sale or selling or transferring alcohol to others is part of that went against the National Prohibition Act. And so the courts would close down and grab that warehouse or building or storefront or whatever it is, and the courts would turn that property over to the Marshal Service. And so with the Marshal Service then coming in and administering that property, and so that business might be closed. That business, if it was a legitimate store but some illegal things were happening, they might go through and take that material. But again, back to the National Prohibition Act, even though a lot of the work that the marshals were doing was not related to like what a lot of people think of as the untouchables or some of the other things that we'll see in movies, the marshals were always there. They were always behind the scenes. They were always doing the court work. As soon as prohibition agents or FBI or whoever would arrest somebody, those materials would then end up coming in, and those materials would go over to being used. The people would get arrested. They'd get turned over to the marshals for jailing. The materials would get turned over to the marshals as getting redistribution as under asset forfeiture or otherwise maintaining it. So it would be really interesting to see how the progress in a lot of those materials. So let's see. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize my music was up that loud. There we go. I am sorry. I didn't realize the music was up that loud. And I know my phone goes off every so often as well. So I'm sorry. Start getting into my groove here in the office, and just the music goes away. So that's the case with under Prohibition. Marshals were very, very busy. They were still doing their regular jobs. Although at that point the marshals had kind of started to lose a little bit of the business of going after fugitives to organizations like the FBI and the prohibition agencies, prohibition and the Revenue Department, specifically because a lot of the people they were going after were people who were also under active criminal investigation. And so with a lot of the people who are under active, because even today, if you're under active criminal investigation, it's usually not the Marshal Service who are coming for you unless you're being arrested as a fugitive under some sort of a task force or things like that. If you're under active criminal investigation, you're talking FBI, you're talking ATF, you're talking Secret Service, you're talking Customs and Border Enforcement. There's a lot of different other agencies that are doing that for you. So that's one of the things going on with that. One of my favorite pieces, I've kind of retired this one for the most part from show and tells publicly, is I started to realize that me taking it around was one of those things that was going to end up eventually damaging this particular document. And what you see is a legitimate version. This is June 2nd, 1997 version of the script for U.S. Marshals. And this was the sequel to, oh, now why can't I remember the name, with Harrison Ford, The Fugitive. This was a sequel to The Fugitive, and so this one was just with Tommy Lee Jones. And so you go through and you have, if you've seen the film U.S. Marshals, you will see a lot of the same exact stuff that's going to go on in here. And so you've got Gerard talking through in different scenes, and you've got everything else that's going on. And so this is one of my favorite things that we have in our collection because it's a very public presentation of the Marshal Service. And an example I often give to people of what the Marshals are like is when you look at, especially The Fugitive, and I think I've mentioned this here before, there's a scene when they're on the dam, like inside the shooting the dam, and Harrison Ford's character is yelling about how he didn't do it, and Tommy Lee Jones goes, "I don't care." And that's honestly it. The deputies and the marshals, it doesn't matter to them if you broke the law. They were told they need to find you, they go find you. And that's what the case is here. So I think I'm going to cap it off with this one. This is one of my single favorite documents that we have. We received this last year on the 230th anniversary of the Marshals Service, on the day that we dedicated our building and our Hall of Honor. The person who donated it carried this document in their pocket. I know it's not really legible on the camera, but I think the best description is to read the letter that came with it. This is a copy of the order of U.S. District Judge J. Skelly Wright ordering the integration of New Orleans schools. It was carried by Deputy U.S. Marshal Herschel S. Garner while escorting 3 students to McDonough 19 on the first day of integration in 1960. Signed by Herschel S. Garner, Chief Deputy U.S. Marshal, Eastern District of Arkansas, retired. Herschel Garner is a very special person. He's a wonderful friend of the museum, and he was, I know a lot of people focus on Ruby Bridges, but if you take a look at what happened at McDonough 19, McDonogh, there were 3 young girls who were escorted there as well. Ruby Bridges was supposed to be joined by 2 other girls whose parents decided they weren't going to do that. They ended up backing out. But the 3 girls who went to McDonough 19, Herschel Garner was one of the deputies who escorted them in. Al Butler, I've mentioned Al's name here many times before. Al later on went on to be the commander of the marshals who were at Ole Miss when they integrated the university. He was also in charge of the marshals detachment at the Pentagon riots. But both of those guys helped escort these young girls into the school, and they spent a very good, long amount of time with these girls at that school going in. And I will read you part of what the document says, and it's very, very dry. I have to warn you of that right now. But the document, a lot of people think that materials like this, and this was something that was in Herschel's breast pocket when they walked into the school, walked past the police, walked past everybody else. Everybody talks about how it was a court order to open the school, a court order to say the girls could go to school. It wasn't. As you read this, it is a cease and desist order, or a restraining order, more legitimately, a restraining order against the state of Louisiana, the governor of the state of Louisiana, Attorney General of the state of Louisiana, Director of Public Safety of the state of Louisiana, so the Highway Patrol, District Attorney, Parish of New Orleans, District Attorney, Parish of East Baton Rouge, individually and as representatives of a class consisting of the district attorneys of all parishes in Louisiana, Criminal Sheriff of the Parish of Orleans, Criminal Sheriff of the parishes of East Baton Rouge and Baton Rouge, individually and as representatives of a class consisting of the criminal sheriffs of all parishes in Louisiana, Mayor of New Orleans, Mayor of Baton Rouge, and again representing as a class consisting of all mayors, Superintendent of Police of the City of New Orleans, Chief of Police of Baton Rouge, and again as a class consisting of the heads of the police departments of all incorporated municipalities in Louisiana. That and it goes through the court order and the actions that have been taken by Louisiana legislature and others to obstruct and impede. It became apparent that unless they were restrained by order of this court, arrest, restrain, prosecute, and otherwise obstruct and impede the judges of the court, the United States Marshal for this district, his deputies and other officers, agents, and employees of the United States for and in connection with the performance of their official duties and enforcing the judgments, decrees, and orders of this court, and then citing a number of different court cases. They then go on, now therefore it is ordered by the court that the defendants and all of the aforementioned defendants, together with their successors, agents, servants, representatives, and all other persons, they are hereby restrained and prohibited from arresting, attempting to arrest, or instituting any criminal proceeding against any judge, marshal, deputy marshal, other officer, agent, etc., for the performance of or undertaking to perform the duties pursuant to such office. B, enforcing or seeking to enforce by any means the provisions of, and that mentions a section of the first extraordinary session of 1960, which basically said that they were not going to integrate the school. C, obstructing, impeding, or interfering in any way or by any means with the implementation by any officer, agent, or employee of the U.S. the orders, decrees, and judgments of the court for the Eastern District of Louisiana entered in the case of Bush et al. Versus Orleans Parish School Board et al. In the case of Williams versus Davis, or the service of any process of the court in connection therewith, November 20th, 1960 at 6 p.m. And so this was issued, and then I think this was actually had these, on one of these it says the 20th, on the other one it has the 10th. And here, the clerk's office, down at the bottom, it has the clerk's mark of the copy, and anybody who's ever done a clerk's copy at courthouse, November 12th, 1960. And so this is a copy of the document that the marshals carried in with them, saying that if anybody tried to stop them, arrest them, throw them in an institution, a lot of people don't realize that's one way law enforcement had of preventing people from doing different things. There was one case of a white woman who wanted to marry a black man. I want to say this was up in New England somewhere. They had the woman committed because they considered at that time, why would you do that? You have to be crazy. So they committed her to prevent her from marrying a black man. And in this case, this federal judge wrote this restraining order against all of the officials from the governor of Louisiana on down to say you have to let these people do their job and to allow this order that these girls get to go to school. So this is, to me, one of the single most important documents that we have in our collection when it comes down to telling the story of the Marshal Service and what they do, especially when you start to look at the 20th century, when you start to look at the twin roles that the Marshal Service really started to take following World War II, where on the one hand, you have them working to help enforce the rights that people had under the U.S. Constitution, and on the other side of that, you have the fugitive role, which they became really well known for and are still very well known for. If anyone has any questions at any time, I know we've got some people on right now watching, and I think that it would be great to hear any things that anybody has questions on. I've been going at this now for, even after the technical issues, about 30 minutes. But I know that there's got to be people out there who have questions. Again, this is one of those cases where I was very happy to be able to come in and work with without using any gloves. Like I was jokingly calling about the gloves off edition. It's one of those things that a lot of us really get a chance to. We enjoy talking about a lot of this stuff, and there's a lot of these materials that really help us better tell the story of the Marshals. And I'm going, before I get anything else, I want to do one more that I want to show you. And I didn't mention his name earlier, and this is a gentleman I've had a chance to talk to on the phone a couple of different times. There was a deputy U.S. Marshal named Rom Latham. Rom, R-O-M. Rom passed away just recently, and he was a friend of the museum. He was a friend of the collections. I had a chance to talk to him a couple of times on the phone, not as much as I would have liked. The Prohibition sign that you saw earlier, that was a gift to the museum from Rom. This right here is a gift to the museum from Rom. 1989, during the, I believe it was in 1989, during the bicentennial of the agency, the U.S. Postal Service had a collection of stamps that were commemorating the American West, and among these stamps you have Bat Masterson and Wyatt Earp. You have Wild Bill Hickok. You have Bill Tillman, who were all deputies at different points. Bill Tillman, and I think of these in a couple of different ways. Bill Tillman was a legitimate deputy. If you've watched a number of these, you know to me that Wyatt Earp, yes, he ended up becoming a legitimate deputy. Wyatt Earp's first encounter with the Marshal Service was being arrested in Indian Territory as a horse thief, and then brought down to Van Buren, Arkansas, from which he escaped from the jail and headed off, eventually ending up in Arizona. He and Bill Hickok were deputized by, no, I'm sorry, my brain just completely jumped out of my head. Yeah. Why can my name not remember these people? But Wyatt Earp ended up being deputized by his brother right before the shootout at the OK Corral, and then went on there. Bat Masterson ended up being a deputy in New York City, of all places. Bill Hickok ended up being deputized for a short time, but there's not a whole lot of story about him doing that. But anyway, this is one of those other little things. I wanted to mention this partially because it's another paper document, partially because it was Rom Latham who recently passed away, and I just wanted to recognize his gifts to the museum over the years. He's given us a number of different things related to his time in as a deputy and his service. If there are no questions, I would be, and again, as always, if you have something that you want to see here on the Facebook Lives that I do, by all means, feel free to let me know. Shoot us a note through our Facebook page or through any of our other front ends. We are more than happy to try and see what we can do, get any answers that we can get for you. We are very happy to share our world with you. There's a lot of materials back here. I've got some ideas for some different things upcoming, as well as some possible other guests that I will have via Zoom. And so we can continue to do some more work as we go to the future. So if you have any questions, like I said, go ahead and shoot us a line. Otherwise, thank you very much. I hope you continue to have a great day and stay safe, and to take care of you and yours. We will continue to do our job here to better help you guys understand the Marshal Service. If you need anything else, give us a shout. But again, take care.